Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Gametogenesis. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. Our WhatsApp line is opened. Just remember to send us your questions via text, no voice notes or pictures or anything else other than the text. And our WhatsApp line is 079 454 9535. I will repeat again. It's 079 454 9535. So do send us your question regarding the topic that we are going to be dealing with today. So today's topic is on human reproduction. We are doing part 1 today. You will see why we are doing part 1 because there's so many that goes into human reproduction. We'll do part 1 today, and then next week please tune in for part 2. So what are we going to be looking at with human reproduction? First things first, let us just remind ourselves. This is the topic that is found in paper 1. So paper 1 of Life Sciences, that is where you will answer questions on human reproduction. 2, it is 41 marks. So 41 marks of that paper that you are going to write of 150 marks is human reproduction. Then what is it that we are going to be looking into? Remember, with human reproduction, there's always structures. Life Sciences, there's always diagrams that you must know the different parts and know the functions. So we are going to be looking at the female reproductive system. We'll look at the male reproductive system. There's puberty, there's menstrual cycle, there's hormonal control of the menstrual cycle, and lastly, there is development of the what? Of the fetus. But for today's lesson, we are only going to focus on the 3, the ones that are highlighted in yellow. So we will look into the female reproductive system, male reproductive system, and puberty. So this is part 1 of the lesson under human reproduction. So what is it that we are going to look into? Under the reproductive systems, obviously we're going to look at the diagrams. Diagrams are very important of both the female and the male reproductive system. We are going to look at the different functions of the parts of the structures, and we are also going to look at the diagram of the ovum and the diagram of the what? Of the sperm cell. Then under puberty, we're going to look at the gametogenesis, which is oogenesis and spermatogenesis, and the development and the release of the what? Of the hormones. So first things first again, with human reproduction, the content now according to the exam guideline. So under exam guideline, what is it that you must know on the first 2 things that I will be talking to you about? Remember, there's introduction in your exam guideline where we are supposed to look at the schematic outline of the human life cycle. Why must we look at that? So that we look into the role of meiosis, the role of mitosis, and the role of what? Of fertilization in the human life cycle. Then the male and the female, we are going to look at the functions of the testes, epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, prostate gland, corpus gland, the penis, and the what? And the urethra. These are the only parts that you must know and their functions, and this is according to the exam guideline. And then with the female, again, you can see that using a diagram. So when you practice at home, when you study, make sure that you know how to label the different parts in these diagrams. So with the female, again, using the diagram, we'll be looking at the functions of the ovary, the fallopian tubes, the uterus, the cervix, vagina, and its external opening that is called the what? The vulva. We are also going to look at the structure of the ovary, showing the what? The primary follicle, the Graafian follicle, and the what? And the corpus luteum. Although the last part here, the primary follicles, the Graafian follicles, and the corpus luteum, you will learn more about this, the formation of this in gametogenesis and later when you do menstrual cycle. But for now, you just have to know what is in the ovaries. Okay, now let's go into the first part, which is the outline of the human life cycle. So with the human life cycle, we said we are looking at the roles of meiosis, the roles of fertilization, and mitosis. So what you need to remember here, you have already done meiosis in chapter 2 or topic number 2 of the year, where you did what is meiosis and why is it important and where does it take place in the plants and in the animals. So now we're bringing it into human reproduction. So this is just to show you that whatever topics that you do, from the beginning of the year. They link. So you don't learn DNA and RNA so that you forget about it. Each time we start a new topic, when you do genetics, which is the next chapter, you will be going back to RNA and DNA. You will be going back to meiosis, which is the role of chromosomes and all those things. So these things are a build up to all the topics that we are going to be doing. So here we know that meiosis is that type of cell division that results in the formation of what? Of the gametes. So now we have the two adults there, as you can see, and remember, before meiosis, the cells that we have, they are diploid. Diploid, which is they have how many chromosomes? 46. We have 46 chromosomes, or we have 23 pairs. And diploid is represented by what? By 2N. Then process meiosis takes place. When it takes place, it ensures that the number of cells is what? Is reduced, is halved. So then the sperm and the egg, or the ovum that is produced, then we'll have how many chromosomes? It will have 23. And it is no longer diploid, but it is what? It is haploid, and it is represented by the letter N. I am referring to the human because we are looking at the human reproduction. Hence, we are talking about the number of chromosomes. That is what? 46. So when these are produced, they are produced by a process called meiosis. So the role of meiosis in the human life cycle, it is for the formation of the gametes, which is the sperm and the what? And the ovum. 2, it is to make sure that the number is what? Is halved, or to maintain the chromosome number in this species, which is the human. And then when fertilization takes place, remember, it is the fusion of the nucleus of the ovum with the nucleus of the what? Of the sperm cell to form a what? A zygote. So when these two fuse during fertilization, then they then form again a zygote, which is what? Which is 2N, which is diploid, and it has how many chromosomes? 46. So the role of meiosis is to maintain this chromosomal number. Keep it constant, keep it at 46 at all the times. So then fusion takes place, a diploid zygote is formed. And then this diploid zygote, which is where we've originated, then undergoes a series of cell division, which is now what? Mitosis and development. And then because of mitosis, then the cells increase in number from this single cell, which was diploid, and then we have 4 cells, 8 cells, the morula, the blastocyst. You will see when we do the last part, which is the development of the fetus, how mitosis takes place and how does the zygote develop into a fetus. That is because of mitosis, until we have again these adults, or we reach a stage of puberty where the body is able to now again produce the sperm and the what? And the ovum. So the role, meiosis reduces the number. Fertilization is when the sperm cell and the ovum, they fuse, the nucleus fuse so that a zygote is formed, and then mitosis ensures that the zygote then grows and becomes a multicellular organism or multicellular fetus. So then in the life cycle, as you can see, this part of the cycle is haploid, the pink part, and then this part of the cycle is what? Is diploid. Okay, then moving on. Now let's look into the structure of the male reproductive system. What is important here is that you must know both the side and the front view. So what we have here is the side view, and what we have here is the front view. So you should be able to identify the parts, whether you are given the side or whether you are given the what? The front view, the side and the front view. So here we said the male reproductive system, what is it made up of? We said that it's made up. We are going to look into what the testes are and what are their functions. We're going to look into these parts, the epididymis, the vas deferens, the ejaculatory duct, and the what? The urethra. There's also accessory glands, which are your seminal vesicles, prostate gland, and the corpus gland. Then lastly, this part, which is the penis. So when you look into the diagram, the side and the front view, you can see there the testes, which are found where? In the scrotum. They are housed in the scrotum. So they are the testes, and then this is how they look like on the outside, and then here it's a cross section. So on the inside, the testis has what? Has a series of tubules there, where the sperm cells are actually produced by these tubules. So this is the inside of how the testis looks like. And then from the testis here at this part, we have what is called the epididymis. This is where the sperm cells are stored temporarily after they have been produced in the testis. And then you can see the epididymis here. We can also see the epididymis there on the side view. And then from the epididymis, we have this tube, the sperm duct, that goes up, and this is called the vas deferens. So it's called the vas deferens, or it is called the sperm duct, and it is in either way that you use, it's going to be marked correct at the end of the year. So then we have the sperm duct going up. On the front view, this is where it is. On the side view, this is where the sperm duct or the vas deferens is. And then at the bottom here, if you look at this part here at the bottom and on the side here, we have what is called the Cowper's gland. Cowper's glands are so small, they look like tiny grapes on each side of the urethra, and these are called the Cowper's gland. And then just above the Cowper's gland, we have this like a heart-shaped structure, which is then called the prostate gland. So we have the prostate. You can see the prostate over there and the prostate to the side. And then just above the prostate, then we have also this part here, which is called the seminal vesicle. This is another accessory gland. And then on top we have the bladder. This is also the bladder. And then we have the urethra. The urethra, it is this passage here through which the sperm cells and the urine can pass through from the body to the outside of the body. And on this diagram, the urethra is labeled over there. So then this is what you need to know. So you should be able to label these two diagrams. Like I said, you should be able to identify the different parts, whether you are given the front view or whether you are given the side view. So now let's now look into each part and its function. So here we have the male reproductive system. This diagram was taken from the Mind the Gap. So most of you you have seen this. Your teachers have already given you this. You have pasted it in your books. You have labeled it. So we are going to go through it again. So what we have here, we have the side view. This is the side view, not the front view. Most of the questions, as you will see, you normally get to see the side view, but there are questions where the questions are based on the front view of the male reproductive system. So then let's start. At the bottom here, we did say the testes or the testicles are found in this structure, which is called the scrotum. So what is the scrotum? The scrotum is the skin sac that protects the testes and holds the testes outside the body. So the testes are held outside the body, and there's a reason why they are held outside the body. They're hanging outside the body because outside the body they will be exposed to a temperature that is 2 degrees Celsius lower than 37. Why? Because this is the best temperature for the production of sperm cells. So production of sperm cells required a certain temperature. We all know that our normal body temperature is what? It is 37. But then sperm cells cannot be fully produced when the temperature is 37. It needs to be less than 37 so that they can be produced. So that is why they are outside in this skin sac, which is called the scrotum. And then inside the scrotum, we have the testes, as you can see there. What is the function of the testes? The function of the testes is to produce the sperm cells and also to produce the hormone called the testosterone, which we're going to do in part 2 of the lesson. So the testes, that is where, when we talk about meiosis now, in human beings, in males, meiosis takes place in the testes for the production of the sperm cells that are haploid. Not only that, the testes also produce the hormone called the testosterone. Then from there, we have what is called the epididymis. This structure here at the top is this structure here at the top, which is like a lot of coiled tubules on the outside of the testes, which is the epididymis. What is the function of this structure? So once the sperm cells are formed in the testes, then they are then stored here. They are temporarily stored here. This is where they mature. So they are formed, then they move out, they rest there, and they mature in this place. So it stores them temporarily, and that is where they will then mature. So this part is called the epididymis. And then we have here what is called the urethra. So this is the urethra. I'm going to just highlight it. This is the urethra. The urethra is that tube that transports the semen and urine out of the body. So remember, when you answer questions, your answer will not just say the function of the urethra is to transport the semen. Transport it where? It is to transport it out of the body. And remember, because we always forget, the urethra does not only transport semen, it also transports urine out of the body. This is only in the males. And then we also have the sperm duct. Remember, the sperm duct is also called the vas deferens. So don't be confused. Sperm duct is also called the vas deferens. What is the function of this tubule, which is the sperm duct? This one over here. It is to transport the sperm from the epididymis to the urethra. So they are formed here in the testes. They are temporarily stored in the epididymis, and then from the epididymis, then they are taken by this duct, which is called the sperm duct or the vas deferens, and then they pass through all these other places, collecting different fluids, and then when they are ready, then they are taken out through the urethra out of the body. And then other than that, yeah, we also have the accessory glands. The accessory glands are what helps the whole system to function, because they've got other additional fluids that they add onto the sperm cells. And then we have those are called the prostate gland, called the seminal vesicle, and we call them the cowpath. So I did say there is our seminal vesicle. The small round one is called the cowpath, and then on each side here, just below the bladder, we have what is called the prostate gland. So now let's look more into the function of these three accessory glands. So we agree the accessory glands are prostate, cowpath, and the seminal vesicles. What is it that they do? They have secretions. So there's a fluid that is secreted by the prostate, there's a fluid that is secreted by the cowpath, there's a fluid that is secreted by by the seminal vesicle. So the secretions of these three glands are very important. Why are they important? They are essential for the maturation and the motility of sperms. Remember, for the sperms to be fully matured and their ability to move depends on the secretions of the accessory glands. So what is this secretion and what is their function? So the function of the secretions altogether, now all three of them, the secretions that they produce, these secretions, they contain, number one, nutrients. So there will be nutrients there. What is the function of the nutrients? Nutrients provide energy. They provide energy for the movement of the sperm cells. Remember, for them to move from the male, swim through the urethra into the vagina of the female, up into the fallopian tubes where fertilization takes place, that requires what? Energy. So where is that energy going to come from? It is going to come from the nutrients in the fluid. Secondly, this secretion is what? Is alkaline. Why is it alkaline? So that it neutralizes the acidic conditions of the vagina. Because once the sperm cells enter the vagina, the environment there is no longer the same. It is acidic. So to be protected from not being killed by the acids, then the alkaline neutralizes the acidic conditions, not only in the vagina, but also in the urethra of the sperm cell. Remember, the urethra, we said it transports from the male out into the female body. So that same passage where the urine passes is also acidic. So the alkaline will protect the sperm cells. And then the secretion also contains what? Mucus. What is the function of the mucus? The mucus is important for what? For mobility of the sperm cells in the female reproductive system. So we are talking about the secretions of the prostate, the cowpus, and the seminal vesicle, and we are saying this secretion has this there are these things, there's nutrients, it is alkaline, there's mucus, and what is the function of each and everything. So now that you know, so lastly, the secretions together with the sperms or sperm cells, then they constitute what is called the semen. So what is taken out of the male body through the urethra is the semen. What is the semen? Semen, it is that fluid that has the sperm cells plus the secretions of the 3 accessory glands. So do remember that the semen has sperm cells in it. Okay, now we're going to move on. The next part is the female reproductive system. So with the female reproductive system, again, we're looking at the same thing, the front, the side. So it's very important to know the front view and the side view. So this is the front view and this is the side view. So with the front view, again, here we're looking at what is it made up of, or the parts that you need to know as a grade 12 learner according to the exam guideline. You need to know that there is a pair of ovaries. There's what? There's fallopian tubes that lead from each ovary. You must know that there's a uterus, which is also called the womb. There's a vagina or the birth canal, and there's a vulva or the external opening. And these are the things that you must know and the functions of these parts according to the exam guideline. So now let's look at the diagram. So here, starting from here, these are the ovaries. So there's a pair of ovaries because there's 2 of them found on each side of the what? Of the uterus. So this is this whole thing here, going to circle it. This whole thing is the uterus, and then on each side of the uterus there's what? There's a pair of what? Of ovaries, and then extending from the ovaries to the uterus are these tubes here. These are what we call the fallopian tubes. So we have the fallopian tubes. You can see there fallopian tubes. We've covered the ovaries and the uterus. And then at the bottom of the uterus, this part at the bottom of the uterus is called the cervix. And then we have this part, which is the passage where the fetus, the baby, not the fetus now, when the baby is born, it goes through this passage, and that passage is called the what? The vagina. And then at the end, this opening which leads to the outside, to the exterior, this is what we call the vulva or the external opening. So you can see it's not many parts that you must know and the function. Then you should be able to identify, of course, this on the what? On the side view. What we normally used to say that no, there's no need for you to be able to draw the diagrams because you won't be asked to draw the diagrams because it's complicated. But one of the papers, I think it was 2 or one of the Gauteng papers, our prelim paper, there was a question where learners were asked to draw the female reproductive system. Although the intention of the question was for you to indicate where the different stages take place, where does fertilization take place and where does implantation takes place. But if you look into this diagram, it is quite easy. So you should be able to draw and label this because it's easier, especially the front view. Obviously, the side is very complicated. I don't think you would ever be asked to draw the side view of the female reproductive system. So then these are different parts. Now let's look into their functions. Again, this diagram comes from Mind the Gap. It's one of those blank diagrams that we always refer you to. So here we're looking at the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes extending from ovaries leading to where? To the uterus. Again, the function is that they connect the ovaries to the uterus and they transport the ova from the ovaries. So they transport the ovum. Please note that whatever I say, I am not referring to egg or egg cell because we don't call it that. We call it an ovum one or over when there are many. And another function is that this is where fertilization takes place. So other than transporting the ovum after it is being released from here, fertilization takes place here. This is where it takes place in the tubes. So these are called the fallopian tubes. And then we have the ovaries here at the bottom. Ovaries, what do? They produce the ovum. They also secrete hormones, progesterone and the what? And the estrogen. Remember we said in the male, the testes, they produce sperm cells through a process called meiosis. We also said they produce a hormone called what? Testosterone. Here, meiosis in the female reproductive system takes place in these structures, in the ovaries. And that's where meiosis takes place. And what does it produce? It produces an ova that is haploid. And over and above that, they produce hormones which are called the progesterone and the estrogen. You will learn more about these hormones when we do the menstrual cycle. Then we also have the uterus. The uterus, I remember I said it is this whole thing. This is the womb, the uterus. What is the function of the uterus? It carries the embryo and the fetus during pregnancy. So once fertilization has taken place here in the fallopian tube, then that fertilized ovum will move down and implant itself in the uterus on the endometrium. And then that's where mitosis is going to continue taking place until the embryo and the fetus is formed. During pregnancy, that growing fetus is housed here in the uterus. Then we also have the endometrium. So now look into the diagram clearly. We have the uterus, and then we've got this muscle walls here, the uterine wall. This is all muscular. But then on the uterus, on the inside, we also have this other wall. This, you can see it has like fold-like structures. This is what we call the endometrium. Endometrium, we say it's glandular because it is richly supplied with blood capillaries. There's lots of blood capillaries that are going through the endometrium. Why? So this is the inner lining of the uterus. It is the place where the embryo implants and the placenta forms. You will learn more about why is it glandular, what causes it to be glandular. So do pay attention so that you will ask questions later. So this is the endometrium. And then we also have, I said, this part at the bottom where it becomes narrower. This is called the cervix. This is the lower narrower part of the uterus. It stretches to allow the baby through during childbirth. So during pregnancies, this part is sealed so that everything is held inside the uterus. But during childbirth, then this part opens up. It stretches to allow the baby to pass through during childbirth. Then lastly, we have a birth canal, this passage here. This is called the vagina. What is the function of the vagina? It receives the penis and the semen during sexual intercourse. It is the passage through which the baby is born. So when the baby is born, it is pushed out through the cervix, pushed out through the vagina, and out of the female body through the vulva. So these two parts are able to stretch. This whole thing is able to stretch out because it's muscular. Stretches out to house a growing baby, and then further stretching out when the baby is about to be born. So this is now the female reproductive system. So now, I remember I said to you, the last thing also we are going to look into the structure of the ovary, but I'm not going to talk about most of the things that are here because this will do more when you do reproduction. So we said the ovaries are found on each side of the uterus. So this is the cross section. So if we cut the ovary in lengthways, this is what you're going to see inside. So the ovaries have a number of follicles. The follicles are what house the ovum. So there's this outer wall here, this lining is called the germinal epithelium. This is the wall that will give rise to the follicle. So the next part of this lesson today is on gametogenesis. So you will learn more about the epithelium and how does it give rise to the follicles. But in the ovaries, there's follicles, and as the follicle grows, they grow and they become mature. There's an ovum inside that is also becoming larger and it's maturing. So then at the end, we have the fully matured follicle, which is called the Graafian follicle, and inside we have the what? We have the ovum. And then once the ovum is released after menstruation, then you will find what is called the what? The corpus luteum. But this is inside, and more on this when we do the menstrual cycle. So the ovaries, they are called the primary sex organs of the female sex organs situated in the pelvic cavity. Each is surrounded by a layer of diploid germinal epithelium, like I said, which divides to form the ovum during oogenesis. And the functions of the ovaries, we did say, is to produce and release the ova, also to produce the female hormones that are called the estrogen and the progesterone. Now we're going to move into the questions. I've said a lot, so it's now time to test our knowledge. Can we apply this information now to the questions? Okay, so let's look at activity number 1. Remember, all the questions that we are doing here, we have taken them from the past exam question papers. So some of you might have seen, you've already done this. Some of you are seeing them for the first time. So we are all going to benefit at the end, whether you've seen it for the first time or you've seen it before. So activity 1 is based on this diagram. So there's an instruction that is missing there that will say to you, study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. Or the diagram below represents a male reproductive system. So study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. So first things first, when we look into this diagram, we can all tell that this is the what? A side view. Like I said earlier, side, front view, very important. So this is the side view. And also, we were lucky enough here that we are given some parts of the labels. We know that we are told that this is the epididymis, this is the testis, scrotum. So even if you were not aware, if you were not sure whether this is the female or the male, the fact that there's testis, there's scrotum, you now know that this is the what? A male reproductive system. So let's look into the questions, okay? The other thing that we always tell learners is that when you get the diagram, try and analyze, study the diagram, follow the instruction. When the instruction says study, you study the diagram, you also put in the labels. So you can try and put in labels so that by the time you get to the questions, you already have some of the answers because you studied the diagram, you followed the instruction. So the first question says, give letters of all structures that are involved in each of the following. The production of the fluid part of the semen. Remember, we spoke about the secretions. The fluid part, we said it comes from the accessory glands. And those accessory glands, we said it's the prostate, the cowpath. We said it is the what? The seminal vesicle. So can we identify them on the diagram? Because the question says provide the letter. It does not say give the names. So you do know them, but can you identify them? Okay, let's go into the diagram. I think we can identify them clearly here. We have the seminal vesicle, which is A. We have the prostate over there, and we have the cowpath gland over there. So if we were to give the answer would be letters A, B, and C, because they said give letters of all structures that are involved. So it is A, B, C, because these are the accessory glands that provide the fluid that is part of the semen. Let us see. Yes, so the answer is A, B, and C. Then the next question says, this is supposed to be B, by the way, sorry for that. Transportation passageway of the sperm and semen. Passageway of the sperm and semen. So when we're looking at the structure, we spoke about 2 tubules that are responsible for transportation of the sperm cells and the semen. Number 1, we said from the epididymis to the urethra, we have what is called the sperm duct or the vas deferens. Number 2, we said there's a urethra which transports the semen from the male out of the male body into the female. So that was the urethra. So can we identify the urethra here? Yes. If we look at E, this tube here, this is the urethra, and then the other one, which is the sperm duct or the vas deferens from the epididymis up, is D. So that is letter E and letter D. So those are the transportation passageway of the sperm and semen. So let's look into the answer. Our answer is D and E. Now, 1.2, name gland B. So what is gland B? We said when we're identifying the three that has fluid or that produces fluid, we said B is the what? Is a prostate gland. So the answer is prostate gland. And then D or B, the hormone produced by the testes that brings about the development of male secondary sexual characteristics. So we only spoke about one hormone. There was only one hormone that we spoke about, that we said it is produced in the testes, and that hormone we said it is called the testosterone. So let's check our answer. Then that is the hormone. So this was these questions were easy. We can all agree that this question was nice. These were easy questions. Now let's move on. Still on the same activity. Now this is testing your knowledge. You were able to identify, the first set of questions was just testing your understanding. Now can you apply? Can you apply the knowledge that you have learned now? So let's look into this question. It says here, test results show that this man has low sperm count. Explain why a doctor would advise him against wearing tight underwear. Explain why the doctor would advise him against wearing tight underwear. So now we'll have to go back. Remember we said the testes are housed in this structure, a skin sac which is called the scrotum. And 2, we said the scrotum hangs outside the body. Why? So that there's because the production of sperm cells requires a temperature that is less than 37. In this case, it requires something like 34, 35 for the proper production of the sperm cells. So now, if this male wears tight underwear, it means this part, the scrotum, will be pushed up. It will be pushed up, so the testes will be so close to the body. This will affect the temperature, because if they are pushed up, then it means they are pushed up to a temperature that is what now? That is 37. And the 37 will hinder the production of what? Of the sperm cells. So that is why the doctors will then discourage this man from wearing white tight underwear. So let's look at what is being said here. Says this was taken in one of the old question papers again. Learners lost marks when they answered that testes regulate temperature. So what is important here is that the question does not ask you what is the function of the scrotum. It does not ask you that. It is asking you why would he be advised against wearing tight underwear. So you must talk about the cause and the effect. So let's look into the answer together. The cause. Tight underwear will keep the testes close to the body, which is what I said. I did say that if he wears tight underwear, then it means the scrotum will be pushed close to the body. So the tight underwear will keep the testes close to the body. And what effect will this then have on the production of the sperm cells? So then the temperature of the testes will be too high. Remember, it's supposed to be 35. But now, because it's close to the body, it will be 37. So the effect will be that the temperature will be too high. Another effect will be that sperm will not mature, or they will not be what? The sperm production will be negatively affected. Because for the production of the sperm cells, the temperature must be lower than 37, 34, 35. Anything above 35, which is higher, it will then have a negative effect on the production of sperm cells. So look into questions like this, especially in the male and the female reproductive system, where they will ask you, if part B is removed, how will this affect maybe fertilization or production of sperm cells? Those questions, they are not asking you to give function of the part that is removed, but you must know the function of the part that is removed for you to answer the question. I hope you understand there. And remember, all the questions that say to you explain, your explain question, they are always looking for what? A cause and the what? And the effect. Obviously, when you answer, learners, Remember, this cause and the effect that is here, it's highlighted. It was added by us for the purpose of explaining to you what is the cause, what is the effect. But when you answer, you are not going to write now in bracket cause or effect. It's not for you. It is for us when we explain to you when we talk about this cause and effect, what is it? So I hope that is clear. Now let's do another question, question 1.4 of the same activity, same diagram. Explain what would happen to the male's ability to reproduce if part labeled D is blocked off. Okay, when we go to the diagram, part labeled D is the sperm duct or the vas deferens. It is the tube that transports the sperms from the epididymis up into the what? Into the urethra. So if it, say I spoke of the function. What is the function? What is this part number 1? Because you must know the part. If you don't know the part, you won't be able to answer. If you don't know the function, you won't be able to answer. So we know that part D is the sperm duct or vas deferens. What is the function of part D? To transport the sperm cells from the epididymis up into the what? Into the urethra. So if it is blocked, what will this mean? So then this will mean that there will be no, let me just remove all of this. If it is blocked, then it will mean that there won't be any fertilization because the sperm cells will not be transported up into the female body. There will be no fertilization, there will be no production, there will be no formation of what? Of the zygote. So let's look into that. Again here, you are not asked to give the function of part D. This question does not ask you to give the function of part D. It is asking you what would happen if part D was not working. So we said the sperm cells will not be transported to the urethra in the penis, which will result in no fertilization, no offspring being produced, or no reproduction at all. So that is your answer. No sperm cell will be transported to the penis. This is the cause, and then the effect will be there will be no fertilization, there will be no reproduction. So that is the answer. Then another question again, explain. See, we've done about 3 questions now on explain. Explain how the secretions of structure A and B improve the chances of fertilization. So A, we said, is the seminal vesicle, B is the prostate. So how do they improve chances of fertilization? We said, remember, we said these two, they add a fluid onto the sperm cells. This fluid, we said, it is alkaline so that it provides protection against the acidic condition. We said this fluid has nutrients, which means it gives energy to the sperm cells for them to be able to swim until they get to the fallopian tubes. We also said this fluid has mucus so that they can move easily for the mobility of the sperm cells. So now you explain how the secretions improve chances of fertilization. So they improve chances of fertilization in that they provide protection, they provide, because there's nutrients, there's alkaline medium. Then they provide energy because there's what? There's nutrients. Then there's mucus, they provide mobility because there's what? There's mucus. So let's see. So here we have the secretion is alkaline to neutralize the acidity. The secretion contains nutrients so that the sperm cells can get energy for movement. The secretion is fluid or it has mucus to facilitate the movement of the sperm cells. So I hope you now can see when you answer questions that are asking you explain. So explain, you give the cause, you give the effect. But if the question says describe, you just provide the sequence of events like this. What happens when this and this, describe what will happen during fertilization. Then you say the nucleus of the sperm cell is going to fuse with the nucleus of the ovum and the zygote will be formed. So you just providing the sequence of events there step by step. So that is your describe question. It's different from the explain question. Now the other question is on the female. Identify part A and C. Again here, simple diagram. We know that A is the fallopian tube, B ovaries, E is pointing at the uterus, C the cervix, and D is pointing at the vagina. So A and C, A is the fallopian tube, C is the vagina. We have fallopian tube there, we have the vagina, the cervix. Oh yeah, I was looking at the wrong label there. You see what happens if you're not paying attention. So C is pointing at the cervix, not D. I was looking at D. Then give the letter only of the part where each of the following takes place. Letter only. Letter only. Learn to read instructions. So we only asked to give the letter, not the name. Where does meiosis take place? We said it takes place here at B. So the answer here would be B. Fertilization takes place, we said, in the tubes, fallopian tubes. So the answer here will be A. So we have B, we have A, and that's where those two takes place. Then going on to the next question, state the two functions of part E. So this is part E. We said part E is the uterus. Uterus, this is where implantation takes place, number one. This is where the development of the what? Of the fetus takes place, in the uterus. Let's see. So it is responsible for the protection of the embryo from implantation to birth, and then it provides space for the developing fetus. So implantation, protection, and provides space for the developing fetus. What is the function of the nutrient-rich fluid that enables sperms to reach part A? Part A is the fallopian tube. We said vagina, it is where copulation takes place, where the sperm cell or the semen will be released during sexual intercourse. Then once released here, they need to swim up into the fallopian tube where they will meet the ovum and where fertilization will take place. And so what is the function of the nutrient-rich fluid? It is to provide the sperm cells with what? With energy. So let's see, it gives the cells energy so that they can be able to reach part A. Then the last question, which is activity 3, says, again, based on the female, identify part B. So part B here is specific. They did not ask you about this whole structure. They just said part B. Remember I told you that the lining of the uterus is this glandular wall, which is called the endometrium. So part B would be endometrium. Name the process that takes place in part A that leads to zygote formation. We did say part A is where fertilization takes place. And there's a clue here. It leads to zygote formation. The only thing that will lead to zygote formation is what? Is fertilization. So it's fertilization. Describe the process named in 3.2. So what is fertilization? We said the fusion of the nucleus of the sperm cell with the nucleus of the what? Of the ovum. So note, we are not just saying the fusion of the sperm and the ovum. Fusion of the nucleus of the sperm cell is fused, combines with the nucleus of the ovum, so that a diploid zygote will be formed. Okay, we have endometrium, we have fertilization, and then describe the nucleus of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the ovum. Then describe how the secretion of the prostate gland provides protection of the sperm cell in condition C. Describe how it provides protection. So out of the three, remember I said the secretions, there's three things. There's nutrients, there's mucus, there's alkaline. So out of the three, which one provides protection? Nutrient, it just gives them energy but does not protect. Mucus allows mobility but does not protect. But the alkaline medium ensures that they are protected from what? From the acidic medium of the what? Of the vagina and of the urethra in the penis. So here you are supposed to look at protection, and it tells you what is it that they're looking for. So the secretion is alkaline, which neutralizes the acidic conditions of the vagina. So then this is the first part. We have come to the end of the first part of today's lesson. My colleague Usamantha is going to take you through the second part, which is strictly on gametogenesis, puberty and gametogenesis. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are going on to the 5 minutes break. We'll be back for part 2.
day, grade 12 learners and our special grade 12 life science educators. I'm Samantha Ragunanan, and I'm going to take you through puberty and gametogenesis for the second part of today's lesson. So firstly, what we need to focus on when we starting to study puberty and gametogenesis is we first need to go to the exam guideline. So I feel it's very important to mention that in the textbook there is so much of information, and a lot of the information is based on the old syllabus. So when you are studying, it's important that you go through the current exam guideline and go through the points that are required in the current exam guideline. So these points are the main changes. If you look at puberty itself, the main changes that occur in the male characteristics under the influence of testosterone. The main changes that occur in female characteristics under the influence of estrogen. And then we're going to go over gametogenesis. Now in gametogenesis, there are different processes that are involved in gametogenesis. There's spermatogenesis and there is oogenesis or oogenesis. Now under spermatogenesis, we are going to study the structure of the sperm and the functions of each part. Under oogenesis, we're going to study the female aspect of the topic, and we are going to go over the structure of the ovum and the functions of the parts of the ovum. So let's get straight into it. So there we have a diagram of the ovum and our diagram of the sperm cell. So that's basically where our goal is towards today, is we are looking at how the ovum is brought about and how the sperm cell is brought about, the haploid ovum and the haploid sperm cell. So let's get started. Puberty. So puberty is a topic that grade 12 learners you can really relate to. That's a beauty part about life sciences, is that it's a topic, it's a subject that has got to do with you, with your body. So it's so easy to learn because you just have to study yourself, look around you, because that's why it's called life sciences. So puberty is a point when a person becomes sexually mature. So there are physical changes that occur in between 10 and 14 years in girls and 12 and 16 for boys, but this can vary. So when you are looking at puberty and the changes that occur, the physical changes that occur in males and in females, you just have to literally look around. If you look at a grade 8 boy, for example, and you compare them to a grade 12 boy, you can already see the difference in appearance. The same with a grade 8 learner and a grade 12 learner. There are physical differences that you undergo when you are in that high school phase. So this whole process of puberty starts when the hypothalamus in the brain starts releasing this word, gonadotrophin releasing hormone. And don't stress, you don't need to know the name of this hormone, but obviously you need to know what sets everything into motion. So we are going to refer to it as GnRH, okay? So when this hypothalamus releases this GnRH, the whole process of puberty starts. So let's talk about puberty in males. So puberty in males, when the GnRH stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to secrete. Now you must remember there are main hormones involved here. There's the follicle stimulating hormone and there's the luteinizing hormone. So we're going to deal with the follicle stimulating hormone first. So the follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates the testes to secrete sperm cells. And then the second hormone that we are talking about in puberty in males is the luteinizing hormone. And this stimulates the testes to secrete testosterone. Have you heard the word testosterone? When you have all these male bodybuilders in a room, or a whole lot of males with their deep voices, we say there's a lot of testosterone in the room. So that is where you heard that word before. Testosterone is usually related to muscles and big bulk, big stature and deep voices. But we're going to unpack that a little later on. But if you look at this diagram, you look at this little boy, age 9. And you compare him to when he turns 19, you can already see the facial features are different. Can you see? You have facial hair there. And you can already see the stature. They're getting taller. But that is puberty in males. So obviously, if you're going to have puberty in males, females also reach a stage where they need to become sexually mature in order to reproduce. Okay? So when this sign, you would see it sometimes you would see the sign on the sign of a toilet door. So please don't go into the wrong toilets. This sign is specifically for males. So it's to denote a male human being. So that is the annotation for males. So let us go to puberty in females. So we're going to have basically the same process. You're going to have the gonadotropin releasing hormone stimulating the anterior pituitary gland to secrete the follicle stimulating hormone again and the luteinizing hormone again. So the follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates a follicle in the ovary to develop and secrete estrogen. Now estrogen is that hormone which gives female their female characteristics. Oh, my English today. Their female characteristics. Okay, they're beautiful female characteristics with the development of the breast, the voice, the curvy nature, and all of those things that we associate with the image of a female. And then we have the luteinizing hormone, which we abbreviate LH. So LH stimulates the corpus luteum of the ovary to secrete progesterone. Now, if you remember from our hormones, we know that progesterone, P for pregnancy. Progesterone is that hormone which is related to the process of pregnancy. So we've learned about these two hormones in the males, the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. Okay, so if we look at the diagram of the girl there, age 7, and we compare her to the girl age 19, we can see a difference. Okay, we can see a difference, obviously, the hair under the armpits, but we're going to look at this in a greater detail. So that's what I'm saying about the topic of life sciences and the section we are doing puberty now. It's great. You are in grade 12 now, so you are going through it or you've dealt with it and you know what's involved. So in this topic, there is no reason why you can't get full marks for this topic. Okay, we know that puberty can be a very exciting time, but we were not going to go there. We're going to stick to the syllabus. So this is the annotation for female. Okay, so this annotation denotes a female. It looks, you can see the little cross at the bottom. That is what we use to associate with females. So for our next slide, we're going to talk about the secondary sexual characteristics. So we already said that there's these hormones, testosterone, and we spoke about the hormones estrogen. So now we are talking about, okay, so we have different hormones in the male and we have different hormones in the female. So because they're different hormones, we know that they need to be doing different things. So let's talk about what happens in the males. Okay, and then we're going to go to what happens in the females. Like I said, something completely relatable, everyday life. Okay, so you're going to have the growth spurt. So in the males and in the females, you're going to have a growth spurt. So they're going to grow taller. Obviously, when you were in grade 8 or even in grade 7, are you the same height? Some of us are still, but others of us have grown up. It all depends on our genes. Okay, if we are blessed with genes from our parents and our grandparents. Okay, so there is a growth spurt, and then you have facial hair growth. So if you look at this little boy, he grows up and then he gets facial hair, and then when he goes to high school, the teachers tell him, oh, you need to shave, you can't be entering the school premises like that, and all of those things. So they don't ask the primary school children, now go and shave. When you're in high school, you know you're going through puberty, you have facial hair, and then they ask you to shave. Okay, so that is what this boy is going through. And then the deepening of the voice, when the boy's voice goes from a lower key to a very deep key like that. And sometimes it can be quite interesting, I'll use the word interesting, when the voice is transitioning from a softer voice to a deeper voice. We might have a crack or two happening in between, but that is all part of puberty. It's part of you becoming sexually mature, your body's changing, your emotions are changing. It's an exciting and sometimes not so exciting time with all the changes that are going on. Okay, so then we have underarm hair growth. We have pubic hair, puberty. So we have hair growing in all sorts of places. And then we have the enlargement of the genital organs. Obviously, if you're growing bigger, every organ of your body, every part of your body is going to grow as well. Okay, we've learned that in mitosis. So let's move over to the female side of it. So when males have the advantage of during puberty, they actually have muscle gain. Can you believe that? Males have the advantage of having a muscle gain and thicker skin and bigger stature when they go through puberty. Us females, unfortunately girls, we have weight gain. Okay, this is weight gain. So with puberty, it's not you, it's the whole process of all the hormones that's going on in your body. When you are transitioning and this hormone estrogen is playing an active role, what it does is it actually causes you to gain weight. Okay, and when you are gaining weight, part of the reason that you are is also your hips become broader. So yes, you become curvy and shapier, but your hips become broader simply for the reason of childbirth. That is what my colleague Nontlantla touched on earlier on, where the baby has to make its pathway through the birth canal. Okay, so that is the reason for that. So luckily for us females, we also have the growth spurt. Okay, we have breast development, and then we also have pubic hair, and we also have various changes that take place. But besides the physical changes, there's also emotional changes. You have mood swings, you become more sensitive, and you are feeling more self-conscious, more conscious. Maybe it's because we're becoming, at that stage, we're becoming sexually mature. So you're more conscious of what the opposite sex thinks of you. And you take more care with your appearance. And that is all phases that you are going through. So we need to embrace it and we need to learn about it so that we are equipped to help ourselves. Okay? And it's so nice that it's part of the syllabus because it's something that we can apply. So let's get to the process that leads us into this direction of changes in our physical characteristics. Now this process, this word looks so fancy, gametogenesis. It's actually a very, very simple process. Okay? So when we talk about gametogenesis, like I touched on the last time when I did a lesson with you, I said sometimes in life sciences, not sometimes, actually most of the time in life sciences, when we want to know the meaning of something, we break the word up. That is why terminology is so important. Your teacher gives you terminology tests. You should be doing terminology tests on your own so that you can become acquainted with the terminology in life sciences, because some of these terms, most of these terms are actually the only ones accepted in the exams when we are marking. So let's look at gametogenesis. So when we look at gametogenesis, let's first talk about what gametogenesis is. Gametogenesis is the formation of gametes by meiosis. So it's a formation of gametes by meiosis. We're going to come back to that now. So if we want to know what gametogenesis really means, because there's easy ways to remember this for the exam, we break the word up. So gameto is actually a Greek word, and it comes from the word gametes. Gametes are those sex cells, okay? The haploid sex cells. And genesis means the beginning. So it means the beginning, it means creation. So if you put the two together, it is the creation of gametes or sex cells. So that is what gametogenesis really is. So if you get it in multiple choice or matching columns, you would know now how to remember that. So when we talk about gametogenesis, okay, there are two processes that are involved in gametogenesis, because you must remember we are producing gametes, but then there's male gametes and then there's female gametes. And you know, we females, we like to have our own names and our own special things. So for gametogenesis in females, for the production of ovum, we call it oogenesis. Oogenesis. So there we have the word there, but remember, oo for O, which is ovum, and that even looks like an ovum there. So we have oogenesis, which is a part of gametogenesis, where the ovum is produced. You can see there the ovum is the final product, okay? And then we have spermatogenesis. Now look at the name itself. You can see what is being produced here? We know that's what? Let's see if we can even go down there. Sperm cells are being produced. Spermatogenesis. Genesis, creation of sperms. Oogenesis, creation of the ovum. Very, very simple. You see how easy it is when you can picture things, when you can break words up, look at diagrams, and then you'll be able to process it. So if we look at this process, we know that gametogenesis is the formation of gametes by meiosis. Now this, I think, is very, very important, the whole term of meiosis, because remember how we remember it, meiosis, the S for sexual reproduction. Meiosis has to occur because meiosis is a reduction division. And when we have a reduction division, it's a halving process. So from diploid, it changes to haploid. And when it is haploid, if we have a haploid male gamete and we have a haploid female gamete and they fuse, they form a diploid zygote. Yes, they form a diploid zygote and procreation occurs. When this happens, a new organism comes into being. So gametogenesis in a nutshell. Okay, so there we have a summary of what we've just spoken about. In males, the gametes or the sperm cells are formed by the process of spermatogenesis, and in females, the gametes or the ova are formed by the process of oogenesis or oogenesis, if you like to pronounce it like that. So that is gametogenesis. Now, in previous exam papers, learners have been confusing the process. In the analytical report, learners confuse meiosis with gametogenesis. As you can see from my explanation here, these are two very different processes. Gametogenesis is the formation of gametes. Meiosis is a reduction division. It's a halving process. So you're going to have gametogenesis and then you're going to have meiosis, which is going to be occurring afterwards. Okay, so please don't confuse the two. But when we go into the diagrams further now, you will be able to see that gametogenesis is on the top and meiosis occurs later on down the line. So let's be specific now. Let's talk about the process of spermatogenesis. Okay, we already know what spermatogenesis is, isn't it? It's a process, in males, the process of gametogenesis is called spermatogenesis. Already we can see the end product here. We can see it's sperm. Spermatogenesis. Genesis, creation of sperms. Now, I need to give you a little bit of a warning here. There is so much of information on both spermatogenesis and oogenesis in the textbook, a lot of which you don't need to know. Why would you want to study things in grade 12 when you got so much of work and you don't need to know it? Stick to the exam guideline. Guys, look at these points in the exam guideline. 1, 2, 3, 4. You only need to know 4 points. The textbook got pages and pages and pages of it. It's going to confuse you. So please, can you stick to these points? And remember this when you are studying it for the final exam. I hope that while you are sitting in your classroom or at home or watching on YouTube, you are making notes while I'm talking, because you're not going to remember what I said now when you are writing that final exam. Okay? So let's talk about what actually happens during spermatogenesis. We know that sperms are formed, okay? But we need to know what happens before. We know that something was diploid and then it needs to become haploid, because then you can't have fusion occurring. The ploidy number will not stay the same throughout generations. So under the influence of testosterone, remember we discussed testosterone under puberty in males? And under the influence of testosterone, diploid cells, so that is diploid, in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. So the seminiferous tubules are found inside the testes. They undergo meiosis. So the minute we hear meiosis, oh, we know we're getting ready for sexual reproduction here. Okay, so that diploid, we already know it needs to become haploid. Okay, the final part, to form haploid sperm cells. So from 2N up here, it needs to become N, which is haploid. So let's go to our diagram. You have the spermatogonium. Here's the spermatogonium. The spermatogonium is part of the male germinal epithelium. Okay, it undergoes mitosis. Now we know during mitosis, mitosis is where the cells enlarge, they grow, and they develop. So it enlarges and it becomes the primary spermatocyte. So spermatocyte means a cell or a small body. So it becomes a primary spermatocyte, and we know here it is 2N. This is basically a diagrammatic representation of what I've just discussed. Okay, so here it's 2N, and it undergoes a process of meiosis. And we already know in meiosis, it is a halving process. So even before we look at the next line, we know that this one is going to be haploid. Okay, we know that this one is going to be haploid. But the fact that meiosis 1 occurs, it's a very, very important process, because we know that crossing over takes place in meiosis 1, and that's where you get genetic variation. So all of these processes, starting from meiosis, the growth of the cell until mitosis, the growth of the cell until meiosis, these are important processes and names to remember when we are doing this section. And then it undergoes meiosis 2. And then you have the spermatids. So these spermatids become motile. And when they become motile, they develop into sperm cells with tails. Okay? So that is a process of spermatogenesis in males. That is how it unfolds. Remembering again, for the exams, we only need to know the 4 points on spermatogenesis. Nothing else aside from a reading knowledge. Okay? So, let's move on to the structure of the sperm cell. Now, remember when we did the exam guideline, we said we're going to do gametogenesis, but under gametogenesis, we're going to do spermatogenesis and oogenesis. But under spermatogenesis, we need to know the structure of the sperm cell. They love asking the question on the sperm cell. They'll either give you, you'll see a little later on when I give you some questions. If you look at past your papers, they either give you the sperm cell to label or to draw, because it's an easy diagram. It's easy to remember, but then it's also easy to lose marks. So you must remember there are certain criteria that you need when you are drawing. You can't just go and draw anything and not label and all of that. So the labels are very, very important. So we're going to go through the diagram of the sperm cell right now. Okay. So here we have the head. We can already see the head. Please don't assume that the head of the sperm cell is round. It is not round, guys. It is torpedo shaped. It's torpedo shaped, okay, or oval shaped. That must be in your vocabulary list when you are describing the head of the sperm. So in the head of the sperm, we know we have the acrosome, and that is covering the head of the sperm. And then we have the nucleus down there. And the nucleus, we know the nucleus contains DNA, and it is the nucleus of the sperm cell that fuses with the nucleus of the ovum. Okay, it fuses with the ovum. And then we have the middle piece, the mitochondria. Now the mitochondria we remember from our grade 10 work when we were doing the cell. And when we're in grade 10 and even in grade 8 and 9, we learned that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It gives energy. Nothing different here. The mitochondria, muscle mitochondria. So basically what it does, it gives energy, and it has folds within it which increase surface area for cellular respiration. Okay, so this mitochondria is quite an important structure. So that is the head region. Now I want you to look at the head region there. That is the proportion. We don't have a huge head region. We've got a reasonably sized head region. So when you are drawing it, you can't draw the head bigger than the tail. Guys, come on. They are checking this. Okay, when you are drawing your diagram, the proportion, meaning the size of each part, must be in accordance to what it actually is. It doesn't have to be drawn to scale, but it must have the correct proportions. So then you have the head, and then with the mitochondria found in the mid piece, and then you have the tail, which is the flagellum. Now already you can see that wave-like motion. You already know there's swimming going on there. Okay. So when we talk about the tail or the flagellum, obviously the tail assists it in locomotion. It assists it to swim up to the fallopian tubes. So let us go over our functions once again. We know that the head is made up of the nucleus. Okay, there's the head. It's made up of the nucleus. It has 22 autosomes. And it has either an X or Y gonosome, because we know that in males we are dealing with X and Y, and in females we are dealing with X. Okay, and then there we go. The long tail enables the sperm to swim up the fallopian tube. And then finally the acrosome. So now the acrosome, the function is quite important. You need to remember that it has enzymes, and these enzymes, do you see where the acrosome is found? Acrosome is found here, right on the head of the sperm. So obviously, because it's found first here, that is the first part of the sperm cell to make contact. So when it makes contact, it needs to penetrate. How is it going to penetrate? It needs enzymes to break the membrane of the ovum down. Okay? Same way, when you put food into your mouth, you've got enzymes in your mouth, it breaks it down. Okay? So here, we have enzymes in the acrosome, which helps to break the ovum's membrane down. See, it's so easy. It's so simple when you learn with diagrams. So you should be making study notes of the process of gametogenesis and spermatogenesis that we've done so far, and even the diagram of the sperm, and draw it in proportion and draw the labels on there. It's very nicely displayed in Mind the Gap. The diagrams in Mind the Gap are very simple to understand, not complicated at all. Let's move on. So now we're going to discuss the process of oogenesis. Okay? Now, oogenesis, like the name says, in females, the process of gametogenesis is called oogenesis. So, oogenesis, obviously, we know that at the end of it all, we're going to have an ovum being formed. Okay? So, this is what happens. We have diploid cells which undergo mitosis to form numerous follicles. So, there we're starting again, the same. Do you see it's the same line from spermatogenesis? We have diploid cells which undergo mitosis, so they're growing larger, and this is what happens at the onset of puberty. So now this is when a girl reaches puberty. The primary oocyte, this is what undergoes mitosis. Okay, so it undergoes mitosis. Now I want you to follow this. So here we have the first meiotic division. So this primary oocyte, it actually goes on to become the ovum. So what happens here? It undergoes meiosis and it forms a secondary oocyte and it forms a polar body. So this secondary oocyte, inside it has lots of cytoplasm. And we know what a cytoplasm does. It nourishes the ovum. It gives the ovum food. So this cell is going to thrive. But on the other hand, the polar body, this polar body that is produced, it has very little cytoplasm. It is unable to survive. We'll see later on, even though it goes on to multiply, goes under meiosis, it still disintegrates eventually because there's not enough cytoplasm for it to survive. So there we have the primary oocyte. It undergoes meiotic division, and then the secondary oocyte develops into the mature ovum, and that is how we find the ovum. Even though there are 1, 2, 3, 4 cells formed, these 3 disintegrate. They disintegrate, and we are left with one mature ovum. So that is how we get the ovum. Okay, so let us read through what they are saying here. Diploid cells in the ovary undergo mitosis, that happens there, and they produce numerous follicles on the onset of puberty under the influence of follicle stimulating hormones. So we need to know that follicle stimulate, FSH, plays an important role here. Okay, and that's how we get an ovum, a haploid ovum forming from a diploid cell which was originally found in the ovary. So let's look at the structure of the ovum. So what I want you to remember now is that there's very, very few diagrams of the ovum in the textbooks. So previously, when the textbooks were printed, they had more diagrams of the sperm cell, but not enough of the ovum. So if your textbook doesn't have a diagram of the ovum, you need to get one and possibly stick it in and draw it and know the labels, because they like to ask the sperm cell and the ovum, as I've mentioned. So if we look at the labeling of the ovum, we got the follicle cells, we got the nucleus. The nucleus is where we will find the DNA, isn't it? And then we have the cytoplasm, and we already know what is the function of the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm provides the entire structure with nutrients. And then we have the layer of jelly. Now, any layer that goes around, that covers a structure, serves as protection. So this would do the same thing. It would serve as protection for the newly fertilized ovum, okay? Which would then become obviously the diploid zygote. So what we need to know, we need to remember, all these pop-ups are exam tips, guys. The nucleus has 22 autosomes and an X gonosome, okay? It is an X gonosome. Remember, when we did the male, we had an X or Y gonosome, but in the female, we have an X gonosome, okay? And then the cytoplasm nourishes the ovum. So I want you to look at the way, even the way that this drawing is done. When you are doing study notes, like for example, I couldn't get the exact color, but I colored the cytoplasm here. I tried to color the cytoplasm and the exam hint there. I tried to color it the same so I can associate it with each other. So when I'm studying for the exam, I will be able to picture it and know that the two sort of link to each other. Okay, and even the nucleus here, the information about the nucleus is in yellow, and then the nucleus in the diagram is also in yellow. So those are key study tips, so that when you are unable to study notes upon notes upon notes, you can make these diagrams and you can use those different colors to help to form an association between the labels. And then, as you can see, blue obviously for the jelly layer. I didn't get it quite right this time, but the jelly layer provides protection for the early developmental stages of the fertilized ovum. Okay, so that is the structure of the ovum. So now we know how a sperm cell looks. We know that we need to draw all our diagrams in proportion to what we see in the textbook and in our notes. And we also know that our labels need to be one below the other, as we can see they are going here. But we will talk about that more in detail with the following slides. So a drawing skill. So this is something that you should do when you are studying. So another one way to study is that you can write down your questions on a separate page. So for example, this is a practice question. Draw a label diagram to show the structure of the sperm cell. So we're going to be drawing, we're going to be labeling, and we are going to be dealing with the sperm cell. Okay, so you must put your textbooks aside, then you take out a page and you start to draw, and then you start marking according to, after you open your textbook again, you start marking according to the answers in your answer sheet. So let's look at it. So here's the sperm cell. So again, the other sperm cell that we were dealing with was in a different direction, but it's the same labels, it's just a different view of it. So there we have the sperm cell, we have the acrosome, we have the nucleus, we have the mitochondrion, we have the tail, we have the head, the midpiece, and the tail. So when we look at the sperm cell, it's divided into three parts. So that is going to be a key in when they are marking your question. So this is actually an example of an actual exam question. And how is the examiner marking it? Very often we have learners who know their work. They understand how to draw the sperm cell, but they leave out a caption or the heading, or they leave out certain labels, or they don't draw the sperm in three sections, and the proportions are not the same. So that is why we are doing this little activity, so that we know what is the expectation at the matric exam marking center. So how are they giving us marks here? They're giving us marks for the heading. Okay, So there's the heading here. So there needs to be a heading. You can see there's 1 mark allocated there. It might seem, oh, you know what, I know this. I know that I must put, but you need to do activities. You need to do exercises where you mark your own work, because you'll be surprised what you will forget. And it's better to get your answers wrong now when we're doing practice activities. Because when that metric marker is marking your paper, there's no second chances. So rather make the mistakes now. Don't feel bad about it. You will improve on your mistakes and you won't make those same mistakes again. So any 2 correct labels. So they would choose the first 2 correct labels and then you would get those 2 marks. Now I want you to pay attention to the next part of it. Correct drawing. Can you see here? It says it must have a head, a midpiece and a tail in appropriate proportions. That's something we as learners, we forget. We know that we need to draw the diagram, but sometimes we draw it too small. Then the examiner can't see which is the head, which is the midpiece, which is the tail. Draw it in a reasonable size, very much like the size that you have in front of you. It doesn't matter. There's lots of paper. Draw your diagram clear so that the examiner can see the different parts. Don't assume that the examiner knows. You must assume that the examiner has never done life sciences before. That is how detailed your diagram must be. Okay? So we're now going to talk about the drawing of the ovum. So I want you to remember that we did the diagrams of the ovum. You know the labels. But drawing it is a completely different story because there's a lot of things to take into account. So we're going to give you tips like label lines. They can't cross. You will see why just now. But let's look at the drawing. So there we have our jelly layer, we have our nucleus, and we have our cytoplasm. Now notice the proportion of the jelly layer and the proportion of the nucleus. One is smaller, one is larger. That's proportion. Okay? How are they going to mark it? They're going to give you a mark for the correct diagram. Okay? They're going to give you a mark for the correct diagram. And for any 2 correct labels. So any 2 labels that you get correctly, they will give it to you. So it doesn't mean you must only now go and write 2 labels. You must write all the labels. Okay, because you don't know how the criteria is going to change from year to year. But the drawing rules, very, very important. You can see it's in bright red because I don't want you to forget. Okay, because this is easy marks. This is marks that you don't have to swat and swat and swat all the time. It's marks that are there for you to just take. Okay. So let's look at what we must remember within drawings. Include a caption, okay? You must include a caption, and the diagrams must be drawn in pencil and labeled in ink. So generally, we draw the diagram on the left in pencil and we do the labels on the right, okay? And then very, very importantly, label lines must not cross. So if label lines, for example, if I draw a label going there and a label going there, the examiner is going to become confused because they won't know. Where is this? They'll say, oh, the jelly layer. The jelly layer is pointing down here, or they're going to become confused because the lines are crossing. There's no clarity. Your lines must be straight and your labels must be one below the other. That is how you need to draw your diagrams. And like I said, your diagrams must be large enough for them to be able to see the proportions and what's going on in your diagram. Okay, so very, very easy. Now we know the sperm cell, we know the ovum, we know our drawing rules. All we have to do is wait for that paper and smash it. Okay, now let's. Activities are all from past year papers, as my colleague has highlighted. But it's the way we do them. When we are doing practice questions, we must always highlight what is it that is required, which we have done here. So there we have a diagram of the sperm cell. So already we can see that that sperm cell is labeled, and we can see that we're going to have to know what's going on here with the sperm cell, because they like to ask this. They ask, state how the following structures are suited for the function. So we must relate the structure to the function. We can't just give, you see it's 2 marks. It's 2 marks here. So they don't just want what is the function of the mitochondria. They want you to tell us it's got a certain structure. How is that structure helping it? For example, I have fingers on my hands. How is my finger helping me to lift the pen? It is closing over the pen. Do you understand? So we need to be able to relate structure to function. When you are learning it, you need to be learning it together. Hence, we said draw diagrams with labels and functions attached to those labels. So let's talk about the mitochondria. We know this because we've discussed this. So let's go through it. The mitochondria has an increased surface area for cellular respiration. Now remember, the mitochondria has folds within it called the crista or cristae. And this increases its surface area so that it's able to respire. And also to provide it with energy. We know mitochondria is synonymous with energy. The minute we hear mitochondria, we must already know there's energy. Okay? The second part of it is to enable movement of the sperm cell. I mean, we got the sperm cell. The sperm cell needs to get from A to B. It needs energy. So obviously the mitochondria's function is enable it to have energy. I mean, if you're feeling so tired sometimes and you can't lift your body up, you need energy. The same thing. Sperm cell needs that mitochondria. Sperm cell doesn't take Red Bull and what's that? All these energy drinks. Sperm cell takes mitochondria. Okay, and this mitochondria helps you to give you that boomer to swim to the fallopian tubes. And then we have the acrosome. Now remember, we said when we were discussing the labels of the sperm cell, we said the acrosome is in a specific position. Remember, we said the acrosome is right at the end. There's a reason that it is in the front of this torpedo-shaped head. What did we say it was? Yes, because it's got enzymes. Let's see, it contains enzymes to dissolve the outer membrane of the ovum. So there is what does it have in its structure? It's got enzymes. What do the enzymes do? What is the functions of the enzymes? To dissolve. Do you see? Structure, function, structure, function. Because if you had to just say the acrosome dissolves the outer membrane of the ovum, you would only get 1 mark. And we know in the exam, this is your future. No pressure, eh? But in that exam, you need every single mark you can get. Okay? You need every single mark you can get. So please, guys, when you are answering a question, it's very, very important to look at the mark allocation. Look at the verbs in the question. Don't just highlight the verbs. Understand what the question is asking you. Okay, so this was in last year's prelim in Gauteng, this question. And then the other function and structure of the acrosome is for the sperm cell or the nucleus to enter the ovum for fertilization. We know this because fertilization needs to take place so we can have a diploid zygote. Okay, so that is activity 1. So this was also in the prelim last year, and it's a very interesting question, and it can be loaded with marks. So the minute you see tabulate, we know that we need to draw a table. We can't just draw a line in the middle and we need to draw a proper table. Your table must have a heading. It must have column headings, and it must, whatever you are comparing in the left side of the table, it must be directly related. So if you're talking about apples, we're not going to be doing apples in life sciences, but if you're talking apples on this side, we must be talking about apples on that side. Bananas. Do you understand? You need to be able, the left-hand side must relate to the right-hand side. Very, very important. Lots of learners fail to do this. So please don't be that one that does that, okay? So we need to tabulate 2 differences between gametogenesis in males and females that are not mentioned in the text above. So what is mentioned in the text above? Sperm cells and ova are produced by spermatogenesis. This happens when diploid cells undergo meiosis to produce haploid cells. So there is a whole lot of information we can write here. It's just a matter of us remembering what happens during spermatogenesis and what happens in oogenesis for us to be able to compare them. So let us look at the table. So you can see this question carries, now remember we said we need to look at the mark allocation. So this question carries 5 marks. So one of those marks we know already it's going to be for the table. So you can do the maths, okay? which means that you need 2 points on the one side and you need 2 points on the other side, and they must be collating with each other. Okay, but we're going to list a whole lot of answers, and then we're going to go through them. Okay, so let's look at gametogenesis in males. What is it called? It's called spermatogenesis. So on the right hand side, we're going to look at gametogenesis in females, and we know that it's called oogenesis. Do you see? Spermatogenesis, oogenesis. We're not talking it's called spermatogenesis on the left hand side, and then we're saying produces sperms on the produces ova on the right hand side. We are talking about the processes on the left hand side. Therefore, we are talking about the name of the process in the female on the right hand side. Okay, stimulated by testosterone, and this is stimulated by the follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, remember we did these when we were doing puberty in males and females. Okay, the site at which gametogenesis in males takes place is in the testes, or in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. Okay, and the site in which it takes place is in the ovaries and the follicles. Okay, now gametogenesis in the males results in 4 sperm cells being produced. We know that this is going to differ with the female because we already know that there's 1 ovum being produced. Okay, we don't count the polar bodies because the polar bodies disintegrated, remember, and they are not gametes. The ovum is a gamete. Okay, so and then we see in gametogenesis in males, this is very interesting. I think you're going to remember this. In gametogenesis in males, the process starts at puberty, but in females, the process starts before puberty, at birth. Remember we spoke about the follicle cells undergoing mitosis? So this happens at birth, and the whole process of puberty is triggered during that time when the female becomes sexually mature. Okay, so this is how they can ask you, and it's not actually this is how they have asked learners in the past on these topics. So this is an example of questions. You can take the questions down and do practice questions, and then mark your own work. It's nice to mark your own work, and then you tick your work in a different color pen, and when you make mistakes, you highlight those mistakes. When you're studying, you go back to those mistakes in your file so you don't make them again. Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions that can happen in life sciences because there's a lot of processes and steps involved. So it's better to identify any misconceptions earlier. So now let's look at activity 3. So this actually happened. This question was actually asked in paper 1 in the November paper, the final paper. Okay, so they won't just give you comparison questions or a diagram of the ovum or a diagram. They will get a little bit more tricky with these questions. So you have to be on the top of your game. Okay, so let's look at this diagram. I like to look at the diagram first before I actually look at the questions, because I find that sometimes the questions can sort of put you in a state of panic, or they can confuse you. If you look at the diagram and then you try to make sense of what's going on in the diagram, then when you look at the question, you will be ready for it, because you've already programmed your mind to look, this is what's going on. So I know what's going on. I can answer questions based on it. Okay. So the first sperm 1, this is the one we are looking at. You have your sperm cell, and then in sperm, and then you have A, B, and C. Okay. And then you have sperm 2. And if you look at the diagram, you already can see that the diagram differs in certain areas, and the length of certain aspects of this diagram are different. We know that it's a sperm cell. There's no way this can be an ovum. Okay. So they are saying here in the question, the diagram below shows the structure of a normal and an abnormal sperm. The diagrams are drawn to scale. So let's look at it. Identify part A. Part A, I think, is the easiest to identify. Okay. The A will be the acrosome, isn't it? Very good. And let's look at 2. Describe. Now remember, describe means detail. As we discussed earlier, you must know what describe means detail. Explain means cause and effect. Okay, you must give the details with the effect of what's happening. So describe the role of structure B So structure B, we can already see that it is the nucleus. So what does the nucleus do? It fuses with the nucleus of the ovum. It also carries genetic material, because remember, DNA is found in the genetic material. And then number 3, explain. Now remember what we said about explain. It says explain the role of the organelles found in the large numbers in part C. So where is C? C is here. What's happening with C here? Red Bull? No. Mitochondria. Mitochondria is happening there. So let's see what's happening. What is the role of the organelle? So now we need to look at what we're going to include. It produces energy, and the cause of which is because it's a site for cellular respiration. The effect is it is needed for movement. So what is the cause? It is a site for cellular respiration. It produces energy, and the effect. So because it produces energy, the effect of it would be the energy is going to allow it for locomotion, which is the movement of the sperm. Okay, so if we look at the last question, which is question number 4, explain 2 reasons why sperm 1 is structurally better suited for fertilization than sperm 2. We will see here they are structurally better suited. So we need to do structure and function, as we've highlighted in the answer. The oval or torpedo-shaped head, not round, the torpedo-shaped head will facilitate faster movement, allows for aerodynamics, isn't it? So it will allow for faster movement. So this enables the sperm to swim faster to the ovum. The presence of the acrosome in structure, here's the presence of the acrosome. Can you see this one doesn't have an acrosome? So therefore, the presence of the acrosome, which is the structure, enables the nucleus or the head to enter the ovum. So how does it enable it to enter the ovum? Because it has enzymes. Remember, the enzymes dissolve the membrane of the ovum. So I think that brings us to the last part of our work. Thank you so much for joining this session of human reproduction. Stay tuned for our next lesson, which is going to be a continuation of human reproduction the next time. Thank you so much. Good luck with all your studies.